Hi, I'm Nelson, and this is the Sir Nelson English School. In this school, we help you to improve your reading, writing, speaking, and listening skills. We also help you to pass the IELTS test. In this particular video, we are going to focus on relative pronouns. We shall learn about relative clauses and get the difference between relative pronouns and relative clauses. Relative pronouns are words like who, which, and that. We are going to shortly learn how to use these as relative pronouns. Now, these words should not be confused with interrogative pronouns. The same words can act as interrogative questions, especially when they are at the beginning. For example, number one, who is he? Who are they? Which class is he? Which country are you from? Here, who and which are acting as interrogative pronouns. In this video, we are not going to focus on that. We are going to focus on these words used as relative pronouns. We can use relative clauses to join two English sentences or to give more information about something. Words like who, which, that can be used to add more information or to define some nouns in the sentence. When these words join two sentences, we call them relative pronouns. A relative clause, remember, a clause is not a sentence. A clause means many words which don't have a complete meaning. They need to be added. You have to add the relative clause to other words to make a full meaning. So, in English, parts of the sentence or clauses that begin with that or which are called relative clauses. They begin with a relative pronoun. For example, I bought a new car. It is very fast. I bought a new car that is very fast. Later on in the course, I'm going to advise you not to use the relative pronoun that. Why? She lives in New York. She likes living in New York. She lives in New York, which she likes. Number one, we have removed the full stop and we have removed the pronoun it. So that is replacing it. This is what we call it. This is why we call it a pronoun. A pronoun is a word which replaces a noun or another pronoun. That is replacing it. It is also a pronoun. Number two, we have New York. Instead of repeating the word New York, we use the relative pronoun which. She lives in New York. We also have what we call defining and non-defining relative clauses. A defining relative clause which tells which noun we are talking about. For example, I like the woman. Which woman? Who lives next door? There could be many women. So to define the woman, we use the relative pronoun to form a relative clause. I like the woman who lives next door. If I don't say who lives next door, then we don't know which woman I mean. So in this case, this is called a defining relative clause. I want you to notice that defining relative clauses are not preceded by a comma. We also have non-defining relative clauses. These add more information about something. We don't need this information to understand the sentence. For example, I live in London. London, everybody knows where London is. So which has some fantastic parks is extra information. Even when we remove it, we understand the sentence. But because it is non-defining, it is preceded. You have to put a comma before the relative clause. I live in London, which has some fantastic parks. Defining. Let's focus on defining relative clauses at the moment. The relative pronoun is the subject. First, let's consider when the relative pronoun is the subject of a defining relative clause. We can use who, which, or that. Who for people and which for things. We can use that for people or things. My advice is don't use the relative pronoun that, even if it is for people or things. Why? That cannot be used in non-defining relative clauses. So to be on the safe side, use who or which, because that sometimes has other meanings that might disturb you. So my advice is use who and which. The relative clause can come after the subject or the object of the sentence. Remember, English is called the subject-verb-object language. The relative clause can come after the subject or the object of the sentence. For example, the clause after the object. I'm looking for a secretary. The word secretary is the object. Who? Which secretary? Who can use a computer well? You can say that can use a computer well. We don't need a comma. In this case, this can act as a defining relative clause. But my advice is choose who. That is not wrong, but the problem with that is that has some other meanings sometimes. So since a secretary is a person, let us take who. Number two, she has a son who is a doctor. Which son? Who is a doctor? We don't need a comma. We are defining a son. We bought a house which is 200 years old. I sent a letter which arrived 3 weeks later. More clauses after the subject. The people are very friendly. The people is the subject. We are adding more information about the people. The people are very friendly. It's a complete sentence. But we want to add more information about the people. So we have to insert a relative clause. Who live on the island, separated by commas. The man who phoned is my brother. 2 commas. Who phoned is the relative clause. The man is a person, so we use who. The camera costs, the camera which costs £100 is over there. The camera is over there. We don't need this information, but we can add this information to turn a simple sentence into a complex sentence. Number 4, the house which belongs to Julie is in London. The house is in London. The house which belongs to Julie. That is extra information. That is a relative clause separated by commas. Find the relative clauses and add commas. 1, 2, 3, 4. Do that exercise. Read this dialogue and add the appropriate after well. As a matter of fact, use relative clauses. She worked for it. Do this exercise in your book. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Next, the relative pronoun is the object. Let's talk about when the relative pronoun is the object. In this case, we can drop the pronoun, the relative pronoun, if we want to. Again, the clause can come after the subject or the object. For example, she loves the chocolate which I bought. You can decide to say, she loves the chocolate I bought. So since we are learning relative clauses, don't drop the relative pronoun. But it is okay in English to say, she loves the chocolate I bought. But let's put the relative clause, she loves the chocolate which I bought. We went to the village which Lucy recommended. Which village? Which Lucy recommended. Do the rest 3 and 4. The bike which I loved was stolen. The bike was stolen. We are adding more information on which bike, which I loved. The university she likes is famous. The university is famous. Which university? The university which she likes. 5, 6, 7, 8. You try this exercise. Non-defining clauses. We don't use that in relative pronoun clauses. We need to use which if the pronoun refers to a thing. Who? Now, you have to be careful with that, especially in non-defining clauses. We can't drop the relative pronoun in this kind. Here, a comma is needed. My boss, who is very nice, lives in Manchester. My boss lives in Manchester. We know the boss, my boss, but we wish to add more information to the boss. My boss, who is very nice, even if you don't say who is very nice, we understand the meaning. My boss, who is very nice, lives in Manchester. Now, in this case, you cannot say my boss, that is very nice. My sister, who I live with, knows a lot about cars. Who I live with, that is a relative pronoun, a relative clause. My sister, that I live with. That is wrong, so use who. My bicycle, that. So in this case, use who or which for things. You can try these examples. The examples will tell you after the object.